Welcome to the latest chapter of If Only They Could Talk by James Herriot. I'm in a church today. I shan't say the name, but let's read chapter 5, which isn't too long. The past 5 years had been leading up to one moment, and it hadn't arrived yet. I had been in Darrowby for 24 hours now, and I still hadn't been to a visit on my own. Another day had passed in going around with Farnham. It was a funny thing, but for a man who seemed careless, forgetful, and a few other things, Farnham was frustratingly cautious about launching his new assistant. We had been over into Lidderdale today, and I had met more of the clients, friendly, polite farmers who received me pleasantly and wished me success. But working under Farnham's supervision was like being back at college with the professor's eye on me. I felt strongly that my professional career would not start until I, James Herriot, went out and attended a sick animal, unaided and unobserved. However, the time couldn't be very far away now. Farnham had gone off to Broughton to see his mother again. A devoted son, I thought wonderingly, and he had said he would be back late, so the old lady must keep unusual hours. But never mind about that. What mattered was that I was in charge. I sat in an armchair with a frayed loose cover and looked out through the French window at the shadows thrown by the evening sun across the shaggy lawn. I had the feeling that I would be doing a lot of this. I wondered idly what my first call would be. Probably an anticlimax after the years of waiting. Something like a coughing calf or a pig with constipation. And maybe that would be no bad thing. To start with something I could easily put right. I was in the middle of these comfortable musings when the telephone exploded out in the passage. The insistent clamour sounded abnormally loud in the empty house. I lifted the receiver. Is that Mr. Farnham? It was a deep voice with a harsh edge to it, not a local accent, possibly a trace of the southwest. No, I'm sorry, he's out. This is his assistant. When will he be back? Not till late, I'm afraid. Can I do anything for you? I don't know whether you can do anything for me or not. The voice took on a hectoring tone. I am Mr. Soames, Lord Hulton's farm manager. I have a valuable hunting horse with colic. Do you know anything about colic? I felt my hackles rising. I am a veterinary surgeon, so I think I should know something about it. There was a long pause and the voice barked again. Well, I reckon you'll have to do. In any case, I know the injection the horse wants. Bring some alkaline with you. Mr. Farnham uses it. And for God's sake, don't be all night getting here. How long will you be? I'm leaving now. Right. I heard the receiver bang down onto its rest. My face felt hot as I walked away from the phone. So my first case wasn't going to be a formality. Colics were tricky things, and I had an aggressive know-all called Soames thrown in for good measure. On the 8-mile journey to the case, I reread from memory that great classic, Colton Reeks' Common Colics of the Horse. I had gone through it so often in my final year that I could recite stretches of it like poetry. The well-thumbed pages hovered in front of me, phantom-like, as I drove. This would probably be a mild impaction or a bit of spasm. Might have had a change of food or too much rich grass. Yes, that would be it. Most colics were like that. A quick shot of alkaline and maybe some chlorodyne to relieve the discomfort, and all would be well. My mind went back to the cases I had met while seeing practice. The horse standing quietly except that it occasionally eased a hind leg or looked round at its side. There was nothing to it, really. I was elaborating this happy picture when I arrived. I drove into a spotless gravel yard surrounded on three sides by substantial loose boxes. A man was standing there, a broad-shouldered, thick-set figure, very trim in check cap and jacket, well-cut breeches, and shiny leggings. The car drew up about 30 yards away, and as I got out, the man slowly and deliberately turned his back on me. I walked across the yard, taking my time, waiting for the other to turn round, but he stood motionless, hands in pockets, looking in the other direction. I stopped a few feet away, but still the man did not turn. After a long time, and when I'd got tired of looking at the back, I spoke. "Mr. Soames?" At first the man did not move, then he turned very slowly. He had a thick red neck, a ruddy face, and small fiery eyes. He made no answer, but looked me over carefully from head to foot, taking in the worn raincoat, my youth, my air of inexperience. When he had completed his examination, he looked away again. "Yes, I am Mr. Soames." He stressed the Mr. as though it meant a lot to him. "I am a very great friend of my Mr. Farnham. My name is Herriot." Soames didn't appear to have heard. "Yes, a clever man is Mr. Farnham. We are great friends. I understand you have a horse with colic." I wish my voice didn't sound so high and unsteady. Soames's gaze was still directed somewhere into the sky. He whistled a little tune softly to himself before replying. "In there," he said, jerking his head in the direction of one of the boxes. "One of his lordship's best hunters. In need of expert assistance, I think." He put a bit of emphasis on the expert. I opened the door and went inside, and I stopped as though I had walked into a wall. It was a very large box, deeply bedded with peat moss. A bay horse was staggering round and round the perimeter where he had worn a deep path in the peat. He was lathered in sweat from nose to tail. His nostrils were dilated and his eyes stared blankly in front of him. His head rolled about at every step, and through his clenched teeth, gobbets of foam dripped to the floor. A rank steam rose from his body as though he had been galloping. My mouth had gone dry. I found it difficult to speak, and when I did, it was almost in a whisper. "How long has he been like this?" "Oh, he started with a bit of bellyache this morning. I've been giving him black draughts all day, or at least this fellow has. I wouldn't be surprised if he's made a bloody mess of it like he does everything." I saw that there was somebody standing in the shadows in the corner, a large, fat man with a head collar in his hand. "Oh, I got the draft down him right enough, Mr. Soames, but they haven't done him no good." The big man looked scared. "You call yourself a horseman," Soames said, "but I should have done the damn job myself. I reckon he'd have been better by now." "It would take more than a black draught to help him," I said. "This is no ordinary colic." "What the hell is it then?" "Well, I can't say till I've examined him, but severe continuous pain like that could mean a torsion, a twisted bowel." "Twisted bowel, my foot. He's got a bit of bellyache, that's all. He hasn't passed anything all day and he wants something to shift him. Have you got the alkaline with you?" "If this is torsion, alkaline would be the worst thing you could give him. He's in agony now, but that would drive him mad. It acts by contracting the muscles of the intestines." "God damn it," snarled Soames. "Don't start giving me a bloody lecture. Are you going to start doing something for the horse, or aren't you?" I turned to the big man in the corner. "Slip on that head collar, and I'll examine him." With the collar on, the horse was brought to a halt. He stood there, trembling and groaning as I passed a hand between ribs and elbows, feeling for the pulse. It was as bad as it could be, a racing, thready beat. I averted an eyelid with my fingers. The mucous membrane was a dark brick red. The thermometer showed a temperature of 103. I looked across the box at Soames. Could I have a bucket of hot water, soap and a towel, please? What the devil for? You've done nothing yet and you want to have a wash? I want to make a rectal examination. Will you please bring me the water? God help us. I've never seen anything like this. Soames passed a hand wearily over his eyes, then swung round on the big man. Well, come on, don't stand around there. Get him hot water and we'll maybe get something done. When the water came, I soaked my arm and gently inserted it into the animal's rectum. I could feel plainly the displacement of the small intestine on the left side and a tense tympanitic mass which should not have been there. As I touched it, the horse shuddered and groaned again. As I washed and dried my arms, my heart pounded. What was I to do? What could I say? Soames was stamping in and out of the box, muttering to himself as the pain-maddened animal writhed and twisted. Hold the bloody thing, he bellowed at the horseman, who was gripping the head collar. What the bloody hell are you playing at? The big man said nothing. He was in no way to blame, but he just stared back stolidly at Soames. I took a deep breath. Everything points to the one thing. I'm convinced this horse has a torsion. All right, then. Have it your own way. He's got a torsion. Only for God's sake, do something, will you? Are we going to stand in here all night? There's nothing anybody can do. There is no cure for this. The important thing is to put him out of his pain as quickly as possible. Soames screwed up his face. No cure? Put him out of his pain? What rubbish is this you're talking? Just what are you getting at? I took up a hold of myself. I suggest you let me put him down immediately. What do you mean? Soames's mouth fell open. I mean that I should shoot him now, straight away. I have a humane killer in the car. Soames looked as if he was going to explode. Shoot him? Are you stark raving mad? Do you know how much that horse is worth? It makes no difference what he's worth, Mr. Soames. He has been going through hell all day and he's dying now. You should have called me out long ago. He might live a few hours more, but the end would be the same. And he's in dreadful pain, continuous pain. Soames sank his head in his hands. Oh, God, why did this have to happen to me? His lordship is on holiday, or I'd call him out to try to make you see some sense. I tell you, if your boss had been here, he'd have given that horse an injection and put him right in half an hour. Look here, can't we wait till Mr. Farnham gets back tonight and let him have a look at him? Something in me leaped gladly at the idea. Give a shot of morphine and get away out of it. Leave the responsibility to somebody else. It would be easy. I looked again at the horse. He had recommenced his blind circling of the box, stumbling round and round in a despairing attempt to leave his agony behind. As I watched, he raised his lolling head and gave a little whinny. It was a desolate, uncomprehending, frantic sound, and it was enough for me. I strode quickly out and got the killer from the car. Steady his head, I said to the big man, and placed the muzzle between the glazing eyes. There was a sharp crack, and the horse's legs buckled. He thudded down on the peat and lay still. I turned to Soames, who was staring at the body in disbelief. Mr. Farnham will come round in the morning and carry out a post-mortem. Sorry, wrong voice. Mr. Farnham will come round in the morning and carry out a post-mortem. I'd like Lord Holton to have my diagnosis confirmed. I put on my jacket and went out to the car. As I started the engine, Soames opened the door and pushed his head in. He spoke quietly, but his voice was furious. I'm going to inform his lordship about this night's work, and Mr. Farnham too. I'll let him know what kind of an assistant he's landed himself with. And let me tell you this, you'll be proved wrong at that post-mortem tomorrow, and then I'm going to sue you. He banged the door shut and walked away. Back at the surgery, I decided to wait up for my boss, and I sat there trying to rid myself of the feeling that I had blasted my career before it had got started. Yet, looking back, I knew I couldn't have done anything else. No matter how many times I went over the ground, the conclusion was always the same. It was 1 a.m. before Farnham got back. His evening with his mother had stimulated him. His thin cheeks were flushed, and he smelt pleasantly of gin. I was surprised to see that he was wearing evening dress, and though the dinner jacket was of old-fashioned cut and hung in loose folds on his bony frame, he still managed to look like an ambassador. He listened in silence as I told him about the horse. He was about to comment when the phone rang. "A late one," he whispered. Then, "Oh, it's you, Mr. Soames." He nodded at me and settled down in his chair. He was a long time saying yes and no and I see. Then he sat up decisively and began to speak. "Thank you for ringing, Mr. Soames. And it seems as though Mr. Herriot did the only possible thing in the circumstances. No, I cannot agree. It would have been cruel to leave him. One of our duties is to prevent suffering. Well, I'm sorry you feel like that, but I consider Mr. Herriot to be a highly capable veterinary surgeon. If I had been there, I have no doubt I'd have done the same thing. Good night, Mr. Soames. I'll see you in the morning." I felt so much better that I almost launched into a speech of gratitude, but in the end all I said was, "Thanks." Farnham reached up into the glass-fronted cupboard above the mantelpiece and pulled out a bottle of whisky. He carelessly slopped out half a tumblerful and pushed it at me. He gave himself a similar measure and fell back into the armchair. He took a deep swallow, stared for a few seconds at the amber fluid in the glass, then looked up with a smile. "Well, you certainly got chucked in at the deep end tonight, my boy. Your first case, and it had to be Soames too. Do you know him very well?" "Oh, I know all about him. A nasty piece of work and enough to put anybody off their stroke. Believe me, he's no friend of mine. In fact, rumour has it that he's a bit of a crook. They say he's been feathering his nest for a long time at his lordship's expense. He'll slip up one day, I expect." The neat whisky burned a fiery path down to my stomach, but I felt I needed it. I wouldn't like too many sessions like tonight's. But I don't suppose veterinary practice is like that all the time. "Well, not quite," Farnham replied, "but you never know what's in store for you. It's a funny profession, you know. It offers unparalleled opportunities for making a chump of yourself. But I expect a lot depends on your ability. To a certain extent, it helps to be good at the job, of course. But even if you're a positive genius, humiliation and ridicule are lurking just round the corner. I once got an eminent horse specialist along here to do a rig operation, and the horse stopped breathing halfway through. The sight of that man dancing frantically on his patient's ribs taught me a great truth, that I was going to look just as big a fool at fairly regular intervals throughout my career. I laughed. Then I might as well resign myself to it right at the beginning. That's the idea. Animals are unpredictable things, so our whole life is unpredictable. It's a long tale of little triumphs and disasters, and you've got to really like it, to stick it. Tonight it was Soames, but another night it'll be something else. One thing, you never get bored. Here, have some more whisky." I drank the whisky and then some more, and we talked. It seemed no time at all before the dark bulk of the acacia tree began to emerge from the grey light beyond the French window. A blackbird tried a few tentative pipes, and Farnham was regretfully shaking the last drops from the bottle into his glass. He yawned, jerked the knot out of his black tie, and looked at his watch. "Well, 5 o'clock? Who would have thought it? But I'm glad we had a drink together. Only right to celebrate your first case. It was a right one, wasn't it?" And I think I shall do chapter 6. 2.5 hours sleep was a meagre ration, but I made a point of being up by 7:30 and downstairs shaved and scrubbed by 8. But I breakfasted alone, Mrs. Hall, impassively placing scrambled eggs before me, told me that my employer had left some time ago to do the PM on Lord Holden's horse. I wondered if he had bothered to go to bed at all. I was busy with the last of the toast when Farnham burst into the room. I was getting used to his entrances and hardly jumped at all as he wrenched at the door handle and almost leaped into the middle of the carpet. He looked rosy and in excellent spirits. "Anything left in that coffee pot? I'll join you for a cup." He crashed down on a protesting chair. "Well, you've nothing to worry about." The PM showed a classic torsion. Several loops of bowel involved, black and tympanitic. "I'm glad you put the poor beggar down straight away." "Did you see my friend, Soames?" "Oh, he was there, of course. He tried to get in a few digs about you, but I quietened him. I just pointed out that he had delayed far too long in sending for us, and that Lord Holton wasn't going to be too pleased when he heard how his horse had suffered. I left him chewing over that." The news did a lot to lighten my outlook. I went over to the desk and got the day book. "Here are this morning's calls. What would you like me to do?" Farnham picked out a round of visits, scribbled the list on a scrap of paper, and handed it over. "Here you are," he said. "A few nice trouble-free cases to get yourself worked in." I was turning to leave when he called me back. "Oh, there's one other thing I'd like you to do. My young brother is hitching from Edinburgh today. He's at the veterinary college there, and the term finished yesterday. When he gets within striking distance, he'll probably give us a ring. I wonder if you'd slip out and pick him up." "Certainly. Glad to. His name is Tristan, by the way." "Tristan?" "Yes. Oh, I should have told you. You must have wondered about my own queer name. It was my father, great Wagnerian. It nearly ruled his life. It was music all the time, mainly Wagner. I'm a bit partial myself." "Ah, well, yes, but you didn't get it morning, noon, and night like we did. And then to be stuck with a name like Siegfried. Anyway, it could have been worse. Wotan, for instance. Or Pogner." Farnham looked startled. "By golly, you're right. I'd forgotten about old Pogner. I suppose I've a lot to be thankful for." It was late afternoon before the expected call came. The voice at the other end was uncannily familiar. "This is Tristan Farnham." "Gosh, you sound just like your brother." A pleasant laugh answered me. "Everybody says that." "Oh, that's very good of you. I'd be glad of a lift. I'm at the Holly Tree Cafe on the Great North Road." After the voice, I had been expecting to find a younger edition of my employer, but the small boyish-faced figure sitting on a rucksack could hardly have been less like him. He got up, pushed back the dark hair from his forehead, and held out his hand. The smile was charming. "Had much walking to do?" "Oh, a fair bit, but I needed the exercise. We had a roughish end-of-term party last night." He opened the car door and threw the rucksack into the back. As I started the engine, he settled himself in the passenger seat as though it were a luxurious armchair. Pulled out a paper packet of Woodbines, lit one with tender concentration, and gulped the smoke down blissfully. He produced the Daily Mirror from a side pocket and shook it open with a sigh of utter content. The smoke, which had been gone a long time, began to wisp from his nose and mouth. I turned west off the great highway, and the rumble of traffic faded rapidly behind us. I glanced round at Tristan. "You'll have just finished exams," I said. "Yes, pathology and parasitology." I almost broke one of my steadfast rules by asking him if he had passed, but stopped myself in time. It is a chancy business, but in any case there was no shortage of conversation. Tristan had something to say about most of the news items, and now and then he read out an extract and discussed it with me. I felt a growing conviction that I was in the presence of a quicker and livelier mind than my own. It seemed no time at all before we pulled up outside Skeldale House. Siegfried was out when we arrived, and it was early evening when he returned. He came in through the French window, gave me a friendly greeting, and threw himself into an armchair. He had begun to talk about one of his cases when Tristan walked in. The atmosphere in the room changed as though somebody had clicked a switch. Siegfried's smile became sardonic, and he gave his brother a long, appraising look. He grunted a hello, then reached up and began to run his finger along the titles of the books in the alcove. He seemed absorbed in this for a few minutes, and I could feel the tension building up. Tristan's expression had changed remarkably. His face had gone completely deadpan, but his eyes were wary. Siegfried finally located the book he was looking for, took it down from the shelf and began to leaf through it unhurriedly. Then, without looking up, he said quietly, "Well, how did the exams go?" Tristan swallowed carefully and took a deep breath. "Did all right in parasitology," he replied in a flat monotone. Siegfried didn't appear to have heard. He had found something interesting in his book and settled back to read. He took his time over it, then put the book on the shelf. He began again the business of going along the titles, still with his back to his brother. He spoke again in the same soft voice. "How about pathology?" Tristan was on the edge of his chair now, as if ready to make a run for it. His eyes darted from his brother to the bookshelves and back again. "Didn't get it," he said tonelessly. There was no reaction from Siegfried. He kept up his patient search for his book, occasionally pulling a volume out, glancing at it and replacing it carefully. Then he gave up the hunt, lay back in the chair with his arms dangling almost to the floor, and looked at Tristan. "So you failed pathology," he said conversationally. I was surprised to hear myself babbling with an edge of hysteria in my voice. "Well, now that's pretty good, you know. It puts him in the final year, and he'll be able to sit path at Christmas. You won't lose any time that way, and after all, it's a tough subject." Siegfried turned a cold eye on me. "So you think it's pretty good, do you?" There was a pause and a long silence, which was broken by a totally unexpected bellow as he rounded on his brother. "Well, I don't. I think it is bloody awful. It's a damn disgrace, that's what it is. What the hell have you been doing all this term anyway? Boozing, I should think, chasing women, spending my money, anything but working. And now you've got the bloody nerve to walk in here and tell me you failed pathology? You're lazy, that's your trouble, isn't it? You're bloody bone idle." He was almost unrecognisable. His face was darkly flushed, and his eyes glared. He yelled wildly again at his brother. "But I've had enough this time. I'm sick of you. I'm not going to work my fingers to the bloody bone to keep you up there idling your time away. This is the end. You're sacked, do you hear me? Sacked once and for all, so get out of here. I don't want to see you around anymore. Go on, get out." Tristan, who had preserved an air of injured dignity throughout, withdrew quietly. Writhing with embarrassment, I looked at Siegfried. He was showing the strain of the interview. His complexion had gone blotchy. He muttered to himself and drummed his fingers on the arm of the chair. I was aghast at having to witness this break-up, and I was grateful when Siegfried sent me on a call and I was able to get out of the room. It was nearly dark when I got back, and I drove round to the back lane and into the yard at the foot of the garden. The creaking of the garage doors disturbed the rooks in the great elms which overhung the buildings. Far up in the darkness there was a faint fluttering, a muffled cawing, then silence. As I stood listening, I became aware of a figure in the gloom, standing by the yard door, looking down the garden. As the face turned towards me, I saw it was Tristan. Again I felt embarrassed. It was an unfortunate intrusion when the poor fellow had come up here to brood alone. "Sorry about the way things turned out," I said awkwardly. The tip of the cigarette glowed brightly as Tristan took a long pull. No, that's all right. Could have been a lot worse, you know." "Worse? Well, it's bad enough, isn't it? What are you going to do?" "Do? What do you mean?" "Well, you've been kicked out, haven't you? Where are you going to sleep tonight?" I can see you don't understand, Tristan said. He took his cigarette from his mouth and I saw the gleam of very white teeth as he smiled. You needn't worry. I'm sleeping here, and I'll be down to breakfast in the morning. But how about your brother? Siegfried? I would have forgotten all about it by then. Are you sure? Dead sure. He's always sacking me and he always forgets. Anyway, things turned out very well. The only tricky bit back there was getting him to swallow that bit about the parasitology. I stared at the shadowy form by my side. Again there was a rustling as the rooks stirred in the tall trees, then settled into silence. The parasitology? Yes. If you think back, all I said was that I had done all right. I wasn't any more specific than that. Then you mean... Tristan laughed softly and thumped my shoulder. That's right. I didn't get parasitology. I failed in both. But don't worry. I'll pass them at Christmas.